All right, so thank you for joining us today. Today's topics, we have a couple different speakers coming in today, so we're really excited about that. We have school safety and chronic absenteeism as our theme here for today. And just as a reminder, our grants, Stronger Connections grants held with under Title IV Part A, which is part of the SSPW team, the Student Services Prevention and Wellness team. And so Susan Piazza is our director, Christine Anderson is our assistant director, and I'm Eric Blazing, who is the lead consultant here on the grant. Just as some reminders as people come in here that mute, it is being recorded, so we left the mic options as a possibility, so we have some back and forth question and answer time, but do mute that. If you have to leave and come back, absolutely understandable, but check your mic as you come back in. We'll have open-ended opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation, and then also feel free to raise your hand, use the chat feature throughout the presentation if questions arise. So our objectives here today is that you're going to have an opportunity to connect with your peers, that you're going to know more about the resources that the Office of School Safety has, know more about Speak Up, Speak Out Wisconsin, know where to find those information and resources around chronic absenteeism within your district, and then have an opportunity to seek answers and discuss anything with some of the other grantees on the call. So we're going to start out with a quick welcome. I'll share just a brief amount of grant information, then we'll turn it over to our speakers here for today. We're fortunate to have Trish Kilpin, who's the Director of Office of School Safety with us, and then joining us later will be Julian City, who is our DPI social work consultant as well. And then we'll have some time for open questions at the end. So I know we're a little lighter here this morning on a Wednesday morning here in January, but please feel free if you want to use a chat or use your microphone and come off mute. Share your name, the district that you're at, your role with the grant, and a celebration that you have from the school year so far. Heidi.
Hi, so my name is Heidi Horton, and I'm from the School District of West Salem. My role with the grant is I helped in writing it for our district, and so I'm helping to coordinate that here. And our celebration so far this year is our grant was actually written to add a school social worker position, which is something we have not had in this district for 16, 17 years. And the celebration is it has been received tremendously. We have more than enough work for our school social worker. She came from another district and is very experienced, and we have been able to work with a lot of students and families in different ways than in the past. So thanks.
Thank you for sharing. That's great. I believe you that you have enough work for them. Emmy.
All right, good morning. My name is Emmy. I am the Director of Pupil Services with the Ripon Area School District. Role with the grant, I actually wrote the grant for our district. And then celebration, well, there's a lot to celebrate this year, but to keep with the theme of the grant, this past summer, we trained every single district employee. Elementary were trained in developmental designs. Oops, sorry about that. Elementary was trained in developmental designs, and secondary, I don't even know how to turn my phone on mute. Secondary was all trained in, oh my goodness, I'm blanking. Sorry, elementary in responsive classroom and secondary in developmental designs as part of the grant. So we trained every single district employee, and it was unbelievable. It has completely overhauled the way that we do work in our district, and it's been very exciting to see all staff on the same page with an initiative and being excited about an initiative that we're rolling out.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. See, Becky, I know you're just joining us. We're just doing introductions. Feel free to use the chat, or you can come off mute here. Just sharing our name, district, role with the grant, and a celebration that you have for the school year so far. Feel free to use the chat too if you don't want to, if you're just kind of joining us. So I'll share too, I guess, real quick. My name is Eric Blazing. I'm a consultant here at DPI, working on a couple different programs now, but Stronger Connections is my primary one, or was my primary one. Served 10 plus years in school districts and as a teacher and as a principal. I think my celebration this year so far with this grant is just seeing the creative ways that people are using the funds. You know, like I was talking to Trish as she came on here before we started. You know, just a wide range. There's so many people who are doing like what Amy said, where they're training the entire district and all the staff in something to better their connection with students, or some people are doing safety upgrades, or some people are doing other curriculum around, you know, mental health or social emotional learning, staff members being hired and brought on. There's just a lot of creative ways that people are using the funds, which is the intention of the funds, to be creative, to build those connections for that safe and healthy school. And so that's been great to see. And we're, you know, kind of nearing the halfway point or so in the funds. We got 20 months left, and so it's going to be a great continuation, I think, over the next year and a half of school. Just some quick brief grant information, kind of a refresher. Some of these things I probably said in the previous ones, but just as a reminder, within WISE grants, the grant will live continually in 2023 and 2024 up through the end of the project period, which is September 30th to 2026. So when you go into WISE grants to do your budgets, you're going to have to navigate backwards in the years to get to the grant. If you're coming up with things where we're not allowing placeholder lines within the budget, so the budget, you have unlimited revisions available. So if there's something down the road that you're looking to budget, you're not quite ready for it yet, we don't want placeholder lines in there, like to be determined. We'll wait until you have those that information available, and then you can submit that budget revision later. And then just a reminder for our grantees here or watching it online, that we want you to start getting those claims in now that we're kind of, going. The grant rolled out, February of last year. So it took a while for people to get that planning and then into the implementation stage. But now at this point in the school year, we're assuming that you should be kind of in that implementation stage. And so we want to encourage everyone to start getting those claims in, so that way you're not running into an issue of getting towards the end of the grant and having funds remaining there. Equitable participation, for those of you that have equitable participation private schools within your district that you're working with on this grant. They're something that came up in the last few months. Private schools looking for some safety equipment and some safety upgrades. And so for physical equipment like that requires installation, it may be allowable. It certainly could be, depending on what that is. So if you have a private school that's looking for something like that, so I'll give security cameras as an example. Security cameras are most likely going to be allowable for that private school to install. It just comes back to the disposal guidelines, within your local district and what that looks like at the end of the project period. And so if you have any questions about that, if you have a private school that's looking to do something around physical safety enhancements, would be allowable within the grant, but, reach out to me and we can have a chat about whether that's going to be allowable or not. Indirect costs as well. So you can claim indirect costs, including conversations with your private schools around different equitable participation conversations that you have, and helping them purchase things and coordinating that as part of those indirect rates, as well as your other business services and time spent. And so since the grant lives in 2023, 2024 within WISE grants, the indirect rates, but it's a multi-year grant, indirect rates change year to year. And so the WISE grants team put this screen together in your budget. So again, feel free to reach out if you have questions. If you go to our website, we have a start guide that walks you through some of the WISE grants things. You'll see that the indirect costs are now broken out by year, and you'll have an extra year or two. So in July of this year, you'll see one that pops up for 25-26, and then there'll be one more year after that. And so if your business office is looking to do indirects, it'll calculate your indirect rate for you automatically, and you'll see that broken out by year, so that way it's reflected accurately for you within the grant. And then finally, we understand things happen, changes in personnel, resignations, hard to hire those positions that you're looking for, curriculum changes based on your data that you're seeing, anything like that. We encourage you to just have a conversation with us around if you need to change some goals, or if you're having some budget, changes that you're looking to make. And then this link, and I put the slideshow in the chat. This link is live and also on our webpage as well. And so that's a program change form. It just asks you a few brief questions to submit to us any changes that you have for the grant moving forward. All right. So let's get into the meat of why we're here today. And so we're very fortunate to have Trish Kilpin here, who's the Director of Office of School Safety. She's been in that role. That Office of School Safety is housed within the Department of Justice, and she's been in that role since 2022. Graduated from UW-Madison and served for 31 years, I think, as a school, was it social worker? So, and in Greendale too, which is one of our grantees. So we're very fortunate to have her here, and I'm going to stop sharing. She'll have the opportunity to share, and then I'm going to post her slideshow in the chat for you to follow along with as well.
Thank you, Eric. Like Eric said, I'm Trish. I'm the director here at the Office of School Safety, and I did prepare a slideshow. I want to keep in mind that others might be watching the recording later, but hope to answer any questions that you might have. Before I do so, though, I just have to tell you how happy I am and how hopeful I am to know that school safety is being seen as part of a larger initiative. So that's what I bring to the role, being a school social worker for my career, brought that to the Office of School Safety. And at this, I think where we're at is in full alignment with the prevention wellness team of DPI, and a recognition that school safety is more than security measures. School safety is being psychologically safe as well as physically safe. And so when I hear about the different projects, about restorative practices, and about, also security cameras, to me, that's full circle in terms of the progress we've made, hopefully, as an organization and as an office and agency, in terms of really understanding the reality of what does make a school feel safe to kids and to staff. And so I'm going to screen share and show you some of the services we have available. I'd like to highlight the fact that all of our services are free to schools, and I know some of you on this call utilize our services regularly, and I hope I don't bore you with redundancy and things you've already heard about, but I want to recognize that there may be others who are less involved with our office that we could reach through this opportunity. So Eric, is my slide being shown?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, thanks Heidi and Emmy. You're like, yes, head nods mean a lot to me. So I already told you who I am, and I want to remind people that our office, the Office of School Safety, was created after the Marjory Stoneman Douglas shooting. So that was Wisconsin's response, that the Wisconsin legislature decided to create an Office of School Safety, place it in the Department of Justice, and its initial task was to distribute grants to schools, $100 million in grants to schools for school safety. It also, in the language, the statutory language, it did state to bring model practices to Wisconsin. And so many of our programs, we started with federal grants, but we do have model practices here in Wisconsin that we'd like to implement. I had the privilege of going to the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School crime scene. I brought Scott Johnson with me, who is from your district, Heidi, and we walked the crime scene and were able to view all of the impact and effects. The building had been hermetically sealed, so the aftermath was still as it was the day of the shooting. And it was incredibly impactful. We also met with families of those whose children or spouses were murdered on that day, and came back with just a cadre of lessons learned here, to apply here in Wisconsin. Here I show you the victims of the shooting and the hashtag never forget. I was recently speaking at an international conference, the Global Summit of Eradicate Hate, and I was talking about journalistic integrity in regard to the way mass violence events, specifically school shootings, are portrayed by the media, and how we must do better in terms of ensuring that we don't contribute to contagion, and that we make sure that we're giving people the resources they need to prevent violence. And as part of that, the one of the conference coordinators said this, and while I was at the summit, that really this whole notion of never forget is just simply not enough. That we instead have to commit to school safety best practices. And that's tricky because I recognize that everyone is resource limited. You're working hard to balance the many needs of your school communities. But I will continue to try to amplify the message that school safety has to be, directly led, that we have to appreciate and understand what are the model practices for school safety and how can we bring those to our teams so those in leadership positions can decide which practices to implement. So today I want to talk to you about some of those practices. And I keep in mind the lessons that we learned at Parkland. This is from the courtyard of the temporary memorial when I was there. And on the second floor of the building where the shooting occurred, this was painted on the wall. And that's what I strive to do, is try to learn from the different incidents that have impacted our nation and here locally in Wisconsin, and how to bring those lessons to you all. So let's start with what kind of services we provide. This is a screenshot from our Speak Up, Speak Out website, which is considered the hub of our office. So if you ever want to reach the Office of School Safety for anything, you have a question about your Act 143 legislatively required items that you have to submit, or you have a question on what to do, how to move forward with behavioral threat assessment and management, you can always contact us at School Safety, and I'm going to give you a QR code which puts our phone number and contact information right in your phone, so that you have it if you were to need it. But I'm going to start by talking about the threat reporting. There is clear research that shows that people are more likely to report concerns pertaining to school safety if they have access to a confidential reporting system. And Speak Up Out Wisconsin is our statewide, what we call a tip line or reporting portal. And many school districts across Wisconsin are using it. It is free. There's no requirement to use it. We don't require it. Nothing in the state legislature requires it. But we do know that the research is clear that when utilizing a program such as Speak Up, Speak Out, that we reduce violence in schools. While after the Columbine shooting more than 25 years ago, it was recommended that schools give kids access to that, a system like this. And we see the benefit when it comes to preventing school shootings. We also are seeing just a wide diffusion of benefits across. So we have many of our reports are about bullying and harassment, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we know that when school shootings occur, that 82% of the time a peer knew about a shooter's plan to attack that school. And so we use the process of behavioral threat assessment to kind of connect all the information we have, look at the totality of circumstances with an individual, but we cannot connect the dots if we do not collect them. And so Speak Up, Speak Out Wisconsin is a place to collect that information so that we can deliver it locally to you in the school, law enforcement when it's a criminal matter, or a life safety matter, and get the information to you so that interventions can happen locally. When you look at the number of tips that we've received over 14,000 tips since we started in 2020 and started the program. And our biggest one is bullying. And we're going to talk about in a minute about why that is so important and so critical. But you'll see that we have intervened on concerns of planned school attacks 407 occasions. We are careful in how we calculate that data as well. We're not going to call something a planned school attack if it's really that someone's going to throw water balloons at their teacher or something, because sometimes kids self-select a category that we don't think fits, and then we correct that. I want to call attention to the bottom number there, duplicates, and that is oftentimes we get a tip pertaining to a specific situation impacting a school, and we'll get more than one tip about that from that school. And to us, this is great. This is, to me, it is bringing to life the notion that we have a culture of help seeking versus telling on kids and reporting. We want kids to see that if someone is struggling, if they're showing indicators, whether it's planning an act of school violence or that they're struggling with depression or they're being harassed or bullied, we'd like to see that culture in the school community of help seeking over secrecy. and not telling on kids to get them in trouble, but to make sure they get the help they need and deserve. And so some of this data speaks for itself, but we continue to utilize and promote SUSO. I do have an ask to anybody who's watching this video later, or if those of you who are on the call. I'm really interested in updating some of our lessons that we provide to schools, to youth, in terms of introducing Speak Up, Speak Out. We find that the school districts who are using it most effectively embed it within other SEL lessons, talking about help seeking, talking about reporting, not just kind of burying it or just delivering it once at the start of the school year. And so if you revise some lessons to include SUSO, please share them back with me, because we really need some better, more developmentally sensitive and effective lessons, and that's on my list to do. So I would love it if anyone would be willing to share that with me. I showed you the slide that says like 4,000 of our tips are about bullying, and I want to highlight why that's so important. When we look at school shootings, we know that people don't just impulsively decide one day to commit a school shooting. They instead plan and prepare for that event. There's a difference between emotional reactive violence, when someone gets upset in the hall that they were bumped by a peer, or those kind of things, or somebody has running with a peer in the lunchroom, and they might say something impulsive, and sometimes those are threats. Sometimes like watch your back, that kind of stuff happen, and that's impulsive and reactive to an environment where somebody feels threatened and they blurt that out. That's different than planned and predatory attacks. And when we look at planned and predatory attacks, this is important for us to recognize that because they're planned, because no one just snaps, then they're observable to others, certain behaviors. And if we get those reported primarily through SUSO, or we do not try to replace relationships with kids and trusted adults in their school. So if it gets reported, then we can intervene early. So if you'll see this pathway to violence, this is a model created by Drs. Calhoun and Weston, and they are premier researchers in this field. And you'll see that acts of school shootings do start with a personal grievance, an upset, where somebody feels like they're being maltreated. And this is in the eye of the beholder, not the reasonable person test, where we might think, why is the kid upset about that? That seems like an overreaction. This is how they're feeling, and this is what they're experiencing. And so if we can intervene early when people are feeling aggrieved, they're feeling maltreated, they're not appreciated, they don't feel seen or heard or respected in their community, we might be able to prevent them from taking that next step on the pathway, which is ideation. Ideation is a big step. It's deciding to use violence to resolve that upset. And once that is done, then they progress on this course of doing research and planning of other school shooters, other school shootings, trying to find a shared belief system for their very overvalued beliefs that that people need to be harmed, that violence should be used. And then they prepare for violence, breach that threshold all prior to the attack. All of these places within this pathway are intervention points. And so this is part of why SUSO is successful. This is something that we teach in our behavioral threat assessment courses. And I want to call attention to the fact that that escalation pathway is bidirectional, that our goal is to off-ramp kids. Our goal is to get them interventions. I truly believe that expelling kids when they are showing signs that they're struggling and thinking this way is not an effective solution. It does not make communities safer. It does not make schools safer. In fact, oftentimes it creates a blind spot where we don't know what that child is doing. So this is something to keep in mind as you think about using SUSO. One of the key features that we find to be extremely beneficial, especially recently about SUSO, is that it is able to take a greater assessment of the statewide landscape of threats. As you know, many of your districts have been impacted by false threats, by anonymous threats, by waves of swatting. After school violence incidents occur, like the one that started this school year in Georgia, in Winder, September 4th, and then also after the Abundant Life shooting, we've seen a humongous increase in tips to SUSO. And so we're able to take a temperature check across the state. And let's say you, Heidi, in West Salem receive a tip and somebody from Greendale receives a tip and it's an anonymous threat. We're able to see whether or not it's the same image and it's the same language. And that helps in terms of understanding the specificity, because as we know, we have to make decisions on those anonymous threats, and that's going to depend oftentimes on the information that we're provided. So really have seen a huge benefit of SUSO. And we are able to, because we're in the Department of Justice, access some other partners and resources. There have been some very significant behavioral threat assessment concerns that we've been able to provide case consultation on in an individualized way for schools and districts, and then also bring in some of our Homeland Security and FBI partners when needed in terms of doing that. We also provide free digital threat assessments. So as part of a behavioral threat assessment, we want to understand the youth's social media impact and the way that they're conversing on there and what that shows in terms of their thinking and their planning. And we're able to help access some of that information and then give it back to you. So all information that really demonstrates the importance of SUSO. Next topic I'd like to talk about. Before I do, is there any questions about SUSO? No. Okay. Is crisis response and recovery services. I am a Prepare To trainer and really take great pride in being able to support and assist schools and school districts when they experience crisis events, to help them in their recovery, to employ practices that both get kids back to learning and recovery more effectively, and also do no harm. And so this is something we've provided to many schools across the state. Since 2020, when we've started keeping data, there's been 175 cases of where we've provided this type of service to a school. And most recently, you may have seen me in the news. I've done a lot of television interviews lately about the work with Abundant Life, and we are supporting them as they progress in their recovery journey. And so I want to talk about this service predominantly so that you're aware that help is available if you were to experience any kind of crisis event in your district. So when we talk about crises, it's really not one like limited definition. We're not only talking about school shootings. We're talking about anything that makes that the students and the staff and your school community feel like it's out of control, that it's a really painful thing that they experience, and often it's unpredictable. And so when we consider what the impact is of a crisis event, we have to take into consideration the perception of youth and perception of staff and families. There are times when an anonymous threat might be received at the school and people feel really unsafe, but they may not be unsafe. They just might really feel unsafe. So we have to respond to that effectively. We've been able to provide quite a bit of support to schools this year, unfortunately, after swatting events and bomb threats and anonymous threats in terms of the way to stabilize that school community. Here's some examples of some of the types of threats that we've seen, or types of crisis events, that we've seen and been involved with just in the last year or so. So it's varied, and each of them are important, and every crisis event has its own unique impact. The way that we're looking at this is that we have to ensure an immediacy in our crisis response that does contribute to stabilization of that community. And then we start the process of recovery. So we look at initial recovery, immediate and long-term recovery. We are able to intervene pretty effectively right at the start, having some model practices that are evidence-based to encourage that community feeling of cohesion, how to provide universal interventions for the community based on the crisis type that do no harm. And then moving on towards the other stages of recovery. Some things to keep in mind is that really that there's just like not This is not a cookie cutter. This is not like you have an exact playbook on every incident being the same. There's no one crisis intervention that's going to impact everyone positively. Sometimes people are negatively impacted by the interventions that are provided. So we have to take great care to provide universal interventions that do no harm, and then be careful in the way that we select our further interventions. This is something that we're doing right now with Abundant Life. I just put this in to demonstrate that, crisis events have a flow. They have a lot of emotional highs and intensity. And right after an incident occurs, we see a lot of often adrenaline-fueled cohesion, where, you saw at Culver's 2-hour waits for food to support the Abundant Life community. We see a lot of community compassion. And this is really important to help people feel they're not alone, to feel that they're getting social support from their community. But that's often not enough. And that kind of fades back. And then we have to look at different interventions to make sure that the kids and the families are getting what they need. The priority practices when we're responding to crisis events and supporting schools. First of all, every school gets to make their own decision. So we'll provide you with best practice recommendations and some consultation, but ultimately it is your choice, and we'll support you in that. And so we're not trying to get in your way or make things harder for you. But we really want to, do these 3 things: establishing those connections and reestablishing protective factors like routines. We know effective academic instruction is a protective factor. So we want to address those things and help staff feel empowered to meet the needs of kids. And then we want to make sure that we're teaching coping strategies and then infusing them throughout the day, depending on the intensity of the crisis event and the trauma experience. But instead of waiting for kids to become upset and dysregulated and then invoke a coping skill, we're talking about embedding them into universal instruction regularly to help kids access their adaptive coping. We don't want every time a child has a tear that they are sent to the People Service Office, right? We want to empower staff to do really important work of stabilizing that community, and kids feel most connected with their teachers. So we want to give them the teachers, we want to empower them and other staff to meet the needs of children and know that they're capable of that. And it's really about those strengthening those connections they already have and giving them some skills and strategies. And then we do recognize in the blue rectangle there that there are some kids who are going to require other interventions. But if we do all the universal interventions really well, we'll have fewer kids who are in need of those types of services. So we're really mitigating the impact of the trauma of a critical incident. So for your knowledge, we have trained 12 critical incident response teams across Wisconsin, and we have been able to deploy these vetted, trained folks to crisis events. We did that for the reunification at Abundant Life. We've done it. We're doing it this week and last week at Abundant Life, and providing a common training. So they went through a week-long academy of where I taught them Prepare To. We taught restorative circling. We taught crisis communications. We taught the things that they would need to do in order to effectively respond as a school-based practitioner of crisis intervention. There's many people who come and say they want to help after a crisis, but if they don't have that school perspective, sometimes the intervention can be either do a bit of harm, or it can miss the target, miss the learning target we're trying to achieve here, which is really trying to stabilize that school community. So you access these teams through us, just contacting the Office of School Safety saying you need support. And I kind of already talked about this, that the teams are trained. Here's some of the things that we most often provide. It's not that we deploy staff every time. Oftentimes, it's just like the leaders, such as yourselves, need a place to be able to get a consult, get a, what do you think? Now this happened. What do you think of this? How do you, helping with some crisis communications, helping with overviewing the kind of messaging that you're sending to the community and resources that can be provided, how to stabilize the staff and help them feel like they're processing their trauma. Kind of feed your family first so that the staff gets what they need so that they can then in turn care for youth. And then we also have some other things. We have a critical incident stabilization fund where people can apply for grants to help stabilize their community. And we've created a social support toolkit and have one at each CISA around the state. I think West Salem has the one in your area. Some of them are in schools instead, but they're for use for anyone who needs the materials to implement the practices that we recommend. I mentioned the funding source, that's there too, in terms of some of the things that schools have employed. Ways that has been used. After the Waukesha parade tragedy, we did award a grant to a school in Waukesha, had many children impacted, and they did not have the mental health supports to provide them for their school community. So we provided them a grant. We also are paying for the care and food and those kind of things for the therapy dog that was brought into the Mount Horeb community after their crisis event. And so there's a variety of ways that we can utilize these grant funds. So I'm going to use as a case example to hopefully bring it to life. I know I've talked a little bit about Abundant Life, but here's an example of something that I think we all know that there was an incident with a child that brought a weapon to school in Mount Horeb, and there was an officer-involved shooting where the children, many of the children who were in the cafeteria did witness or had a high degree of exposure at least to the event. And then the kids were in lockdown for an extended period of time, and they did not know if they were safe. And so it was a very frightening experience for both staff and students. And so we supported the Mount Horeb community, and I'm sharing this with you with their permission to talk about how this went and how they used our crisis response and recovery services. So I'll talk about the initial impact phase first, that while the kids were still in lockdown and before they were reunified, we were able to make connection with the school district and give some guidance on how to get through that initial time. But their first request was, could we take those trained crisis counselors and could we bring them to the school the next day to meet with students in small groups that were uniquely impacted or on one-on-one? And while we can do that, and we certainly are able to do that, my coaching was yes and the yes and is we can do that, but I think you're missing some steps. So try to provide some universal interventions for staff, an opportunity to debrief about their experience, find out what they needed, do a little bit of psychological first aid for staff, and then do what we call social support. It was giving the opportunity for the community to gather. This was, again, the photos used with permission, that this was initially at the opportunity to gather, and we had students and families and first responders all gathering together in a structured, supervised way to after the crisis event. They were doing art together. We had the social support toolkit has big banner paper and markers and all kinds of materials where they were able to demonstrate their care for each other. And it was really a powerful 2 hours with the community, and it kind of set the tone for how things were going to move forward. And then we've been able to provide them with ongoing support. If you can imagine, we all, at least I really espouse doing school safety drills in a way that's trauma informed, so that we want to make sure that our drills don't do further harm, that we don't have kids feel unsafe while they're doing their drills. We don't need to increase their anxiety to be effective. But now when you're looking at drills, even if you have that trauma sensitivity, how do you do your drills when kids really were in a situation that they felt scared? They were worried for their safety. And now we have to be very careful in how we do drills and how we kind of like dial back some of the messaging and some of the experiences so that kids are successful and we increase their confidence and we increase their exposure slowly back to the drills. We also need to empower staff to do that meaningfully. So that's some of the work that we did with them. We also partnered with them as the investigative report was released. Their crisis was on May 1st. And just as right before going back to school year, the Department of Criminal Investigation released their report. There was an investigation to see if the law enforcement actions were lawful, and they were deemed to be lawful. But many details were in that very, very long report, including video footage, body-worn camera footage that was upsetting and distressing to watch and easily accessible. So we gave support. I was able to help the school district get access to some of that information in a really careful way, and then help them deliver some key points to their staff, so their staff's not first learning about it on the news, which is really important. And so throughout that investigative process, and then we've partnered with them in terms of back to school. How are we going to make sure that academic instruction really has some engagement and rigor for those that need that, and some menu of options in order to keep kids engaged but not make them feel overwhelmed with new learning. So this is something that was really powerful in helping and supporting Mount Horeb. And then here is Crumble. Yes, his name is Crumble, like the cookie. And I think they have I don't know how the cookie's spelled, but that they did some physical improvements. And then we also have supported them in their therapy dog, which is living with their high school principal. The kids that were most impacted by the trauma were in 8th grade. And so it now is available to them at their school. So that's just an example of how we've used our crisis response teams. And then again, we are actively engaged with supporting Mount Abundant Life at this time in terms of their recovery. Any questions about the crisis response and recovery services before I launch into the behavioral threat assessment? Nope. Okay. So hand in hand with that threat reporting of collecting the dots, now we need to connect the dots. So there's a vast difference between kids who pose a threat and those that make a threat. I think I highlighted that earlier when I was talking about the difference between impulsive reactive violence and planned and predatory violence. But when we look at behavioral threat assessment and management, I want to highlight the term "and management," because it's not enough just to assess whether or not if somebody is presenting as dangerous. Instead, we have to figure out what we're going to do to provide the appropriate interventions and keep our school safe while we're meeting the needs of youth. So in my experience, schools across Wisconsin, really were feeling that they didn't have the tools to create that safety and intervention plan. And so they were more likely to use exclusionary discipline. So instead, we're trying to center around that individual, where we're identifying what happened, we're investigating it using multiple pieces of information, including the voice and feedback from those who know the child best. And that's their family, that's their the school staff that work with them. And then we assess that with the goal of understanding their thinking and where they're at, and then creating a management plan, as opposed to a goal of trying to document that the child needs to be removed or expelled. And so this is a very different way of thinking than some experience. And our trainings hopefully are building teams across Wisconsin that have a shared understanding of what is effective when it comes to behavioral threat assessment and management, and then utilizing the tools and resources to do that. So we have created a protocol. We're about to release a newly revised protocol. I'm really proud of the revision. We even have things in there like forms and interview forms for children who might be younger or have developmental delays. We are providing lots of services and support and trying to improve our practices to the point where others across the nation are asking for our material. So look for, if you don't get our newsletter, please sign up, because you'll see soon, very soon, a guidebook and all of the new forms. Part of our new process is different than the behavioral threat assessment as it first came out from our office, in that we have created a triage process and an inquiry process prior to the full assessment. This is where most of the cases should lie. About 85% of the cases would be resolved within the triage or inquiry phase, and that is less time intensive than the full assessment, and it really focuses on employing practices that we're already doing in schools in terms of creating an effective intervention plan for youth to help them grow the skills they need, predominantly with dysregulation, with their peer group, their feelings about that, their feelings of connectedness, and trying to resolve some of those issues for them. So we have a whole booklet that's going to teach you, and if you haven't taken one of our classes, I encourage you to. Something that we're able to, this is our trainings page, and so you'll find all of our trainings on there, and we encourage you, if you haven't already, to bring a team. We also look to have people around the state to host these so that they can, we can bring people from that region. Emmy, I'd love to answer your question.
You actually just did. We are like diehard in this district in Ripon. We've gotten, I think we have over 20 people trained in the behavioral threat assessment and management, our entire admin team, but we had some turnover in administrators. So we've been hoping to bring this training to Ripon. We'd also like to train our special ed and people service staff to completion. Almost everybody's been trained. So that is something that we could coordinate to have a training in our district.
Yes, and the ask from our part is that it's not limited to your district team, but it's for your region, so that we can get as many people trained as possible. We've trained over 8,000 people, and we have asks all the time. So we're trying to just bring it around the state equitably. And so if you have a facility that could host more than 100 people, that would be great, so that we can open it up to others. But we charge no fees for our trainings. And if you just email school safety, which I'll send you the information at the end, and just say you're interested in hosting a training for the region, we will connect back with you and come up with a plan for that. I also want, thanks, Emmy. I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
And I love it that you want to have pupil service and special education staff trained. This is great. So I also want to highlight that there's an e-learning module that I partnered with DPI on to create for the one for the nation, and then one specific to Wisconsin. And the only difference between the two is that the one in Wisconsin is housed on the DPI server, and you can get a certificate of completion for staff. So it's 1 hour. Well, it's really about 65, 70 minutes, depending on how fast you go on the self-paced module. But it's 1 hour of me teaching people about that pathway to violence and about what are the warning behaviors that we might see and how to report them. And so that is something that you can easily share with staff. Here, I also want to point out about a training resource is there's a recorded e-learning module on how to do school safety drills in a way that mitigate trauma. And so I encourage you to access that. And then the Foundations of Targeted Violence e-learning, this is what it looks like. This is something I created with Homeland Security. So a lot of formal language in it, but it still ticks the boxes in terms of exposing staff. And it's a pretty easy way to have some universal training for all staff and getting that certificate of completion. Emmy asked the question, so we're constantly, training around the state for behavioral threat assessment and management in terms of empowering people to develop intervention and support plans for youth. And then I also just point out, this is a redundant slide. I'm sorry. I don't know why that was. Last thing I'll talk about, and I'm really going to finish on time, which is great because I have a 10 o'clock meeting, is that the general school safety guidance part. So most of you know, and maybe some of you don't, that schools are required to submit 5 documents annually to our office. We do get many open record requests from media in certain areas asking if schools met their compliance deadline and if they did what was told. There's great variability in terms of the way these requirements are being met across the state. So these are the 5 things that have to be submitted. One is MAPS, a safety assessment, a school safety plan, which is your emergency operations plan, what you're doing for safety training for staff, and drills, school safety drills. So what I want to highlight is that nothing stands in isolation. So it's really, the model is supposed to be that you first do a site assessment. And while we often limit our school safety teams to those in like building and grounds, or a certain administrator with that as part of their task, we encourage schools to have a school safety team separate from their crisis team, but to have representation on the school safety team from pupil service mental health, from special education staff, from lunchroom staff, a varied multidisciplinary team, so that they can look at the way that whatever decisions are made impact youth in a comprehensive way. So that site assessment is supposed to be done with law enforcement, and it's on site, walking through your school, seeing where your vulnerabilities are, and then looking at what other resources you have available. And that should lead to what your safety plan stipulates. There is no cookie cutter that we can provide for a safety plan that would be effective. Many people say, can you give me a model school safety plan? And my worry is that they'll just put their name on the top of it, and then it's going to be the school safety plan that sits on a shelf and never gets looked at. So school safety plan needs to be customizable if you're in a rural school district, if you're in an urban school district, if you have a train tracks next to your school, whatever that might be. And then the drills and training is supposed to practice your safety plan, the different elements. And then afterwards, there's clear research that after we do our drills, we should be giving voice, and we should giving feedback opportunities for youth and for staff to talk to us about how that felt, ask for their feedback, and then use that feedback to potentially improve the safety plan. These I like this slide because there's some confusion across the state. It's odd that certain drills get reported to certain places and some elsewhere. So we worked together with the prevention wellness team at DPI to create a matrix where everyone can understand where these lie. I mentioned earlier the e-learning or the video recorded module that I had made. It's really just a training I did. They happen to record. I'm not saying it's the best training I've ever done, but it's good. And it's how to do these drills in ways that are trauma sensitive and non-sensorial. We don't want the sounds of frightening things to be utilized. And we always want kids to know that it is a drill. We do not need to increase anxiety to meet the goals of a drill, which is to build muscle memory so kids know what to do in an emergency. There's the highlighted the link to the training opportunity that I already mentioned. So that is what I have for you. This QR code will put our phone number for school safety and our email address right into your phones. So if you want to do that, we welcome you to. And then the old school version is our information right here. So with that, I will stop sharing and see if there's any questions. Did I stop sharing?
You
Yes.
did. And I just put your slideshow in the chat again for those that maybe joined after I had initially done that. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Hi, Julie.
Hello, how's it going? Thanks for your
Good to see you.
presentation.
Yeah, it's good to see you. No questions. Well, I am available. This isn't your only opportunity. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to address the group. And I love it that together we can create schools that are safe and that feel safe to our kids. So I have another meeting, so I'm going to sign off, and I'd love to stay for Julie's discussion, but I won't have the opportunity, so I'll have to tune in another time. So thanks again for the invitation, Eric.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing the information.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to move on to our second part here. And we have Julian City from the Department of Public Instruction. She's our school social work consultant. And so she is here to share about chronic absenteeism and other areas that you can support students in your schools. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here to talk about this. It's wonderful to see all of you. I am the school social work consultant, so I get to deal with a lot of really important, interesting topics that you all do as well. But specifically, I work on attendance and truancy. I work with students in out-of-home care on that work group. I do ethics and boundaries and school social work practice and pupil records and confidentiality, consent, all of those kinds of things. But today we're talking about attendance, so that's lovely. And so I'd just love to hear from each of you. Maybe if we could just have a chance to hear, let me know who you are, but then your role, but then what's going on in your district related to attendance, truancy, absenteeism? Do you have some challenges? Do you have some like cool things that are happening? Are you implementing new programs or something that's working? We'd love to hear from you. So is there anybody that would be willing to go first? Yeah. Morgan? Oh, we can't hear you. Can anyone hear you? No, I can't hear you. Um, no, I still can't hear you. Yeah, you're not on mute. Oh no. But I really want to hear you. Okay. All right. Typing a few things. Well, maybe while they're figuring that out, does somebody else willing to maybe share?
Yeah, I will, Julie. I submitted a question. I'm Emmy, the Director of People Service with the Ripon School District. And I did submit a question. I just said the one thing we've been doing like 2 years worth of work around attendance and truancy, and we've been able to make a lot of improvement. The one area that we just continue to, I guess, struggle to make any kind of a fluid decision K-12 on how we want to handle is the part of a day, right? So in statute, talking about all or part of a day, obviously, if we were to play it by the book with state statute and do part of a day, I mean, that would be a social worker's full-time job, right? Is just following up with all of those incidents. So I guess what we've currently been doing, specifically like at the high school, thinking about those 10 overall days that students are allowed in a school year, what we've been doing is once they hit 80 missed class periods, so that would be the 8 hours in a day over 10 days is how we came to that 80. That's where we've been issuing truancy. And obviously there's a lot of intervention happening prior to getting to that point. But I'm just curious what you've seen other school districts do or what guidance or recommendations you might have around just in general calculating truancy and knowing, obviously using some discretion for individual circumstances, but knowing when you've hit that point of like, we're going to file now at this point. I don't know if that made any sense. I'm sorry. I'm just rambling.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Thank you for sharing that. And this is something that a lot of districts struggle. I wanna hold on to that question, and I want to let others respond to it as well, so we can hear what they're doing in their districts. But Emmy, you mentioned that you're doing some really cool things, that you're moving the needle, and that is not something that every school and district is able to do. So great job on that. But would you mind just sharing some of the work that you've been doing over the last 2 years?
Yeah, so one of the things that we started to do was, we developed a truancy committee because we haven't been always, consistent in what we do for our first and second graders isn't always the same for middle and high schoolers. And sometimes it can't be because there's a different onus of responsibility for elementary because obviously they're not driving themselves to school. But the biggest thing that we started doing was just trying to get ahead in terms of intervention. So we created a process essentially, and we put it all into a process document of like, what are we doing and at which stages? So we implemented warning letters prior to getting to that 5 or 10 days. And what do those look like? We do warning letters at the 3 and 7, again, depending if you're talking about simple truancy or habitual truancy. But depending on the student and the circumstance and the family, the person that has the best rapport with that family, so it could be a special ed teacher, it could be a school counselor, whomever, is actually reaching out just prior to that letter going out and just explaining you're going to be getting a letter. And in your letter, it's going to explain more information about, simple or habitual truancy and what that means and what your responsibilities are as a parent. We include a tip sheet with that, just some ideas that, what can parents do? And then based on what our local judge has asked us for when we do a truancy referral, we ask a specific set of questions to try to understand where the truancy issues are coming from. And then also just to plan for what can the school do? Like if it's a true transportation issue, what can we do? All kinds of stuff, obviously. There's a whole list of that. But the person who's reaching out to the family goes through those kinds of questions, try to get to the bottom of it, and then say, we want to work with you. We want to, try to figure out how to get your student here. So it's just been creating cleaner processes and ensuring that we're following those, no matter if it's, again, a first grader or an 11th grader. We want to make sure that we have consistent practices.
Well, that's really great. Yeah. I love that you first started with what are you doing? A lot of districts sort of like don't really know, right? Or like one building's doing something, another building's doing something completely different, or even just how they're like thinking of that, what that part day is, or truancy, and how that's responded to can look so different at elementary, middle. And then you've got a family with kids in both levels, or like the kid goes from one to the other, and it's like, what's going on, right? That's really difficult for the parent and kids too. So I love that you just started with like mapping out what are we doing, and that's a really great place for teams to start with that like multi-level system of support. Like, what are we doing for everyone? What are we doing for some people? What are we doing on the high intervention area? So that's great. And then I love that idea that you're like really thinking about that like trauma sensitive, culture responsive, student centered practice of who has the best rapport with the student, right? The family's not going to get this like random letter out of the blue that's like starts with the punishments like we hate you and we want you to have a fine if your kid doesn't come to school, right? Which some of these attendance letters in districts can look like. And so you're actually like prefacing that letter with someone with rapport with that student. So that's wonderful. And you're bringing the whole staff in like, hey, this is all of our responsibility to promote good attendance. So I love that idea as well. And the tip sheet for families, and then asking that specific set of questions to get to the root cause, because that's something that I'm always talking about as well, is what's the root cause? Because the data point of habitual truancy tells us nothing about a student. It doesn't tell us their strengths, their needs. It doesn't even give us a clue as to how much class they've missed. Like you said, it can be completely different. I could be habitually truant and have missed 5 times one period of class, or it could be habitually truant and have missed 20 days, right? Like that data point means nothing. And so I love that you're getting to that root cause and then asking, what can the school do? Right. And certainly we want to encourage what can the student do, what can the parent do, but like, right, we have control, our locus of control is the school. So I'm just hearing like lots of really great things there. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks for that work. And then I heard that question about like, what are other people doing for like, how do you consider part of a day or calculating truancy? And I don't know if Missy or Morgan, Becky, anyone else, do you want to respond to that? How are you considering part day? And
we do something similar, Emmy, to what you shared with then periods of attendance. That becomes more of an issue, I would say, at our secondary level than our elementary. We tend to see more of the partial day attendance, like coming in after missing the first chunk of the day at some of our high schoolers. So we've talked through some of those same things with a number of periods.
Yeah, and I know Morgan's working on typing, and I'm going to get to your chat as well. So thank you. It is really different. So Morgan's currently creating district-wide standards of measuring attendance, rewriting the school handbook to reflect clear language and enforcing rules. It does vary so incredibly widely across the state. In the district I was in, we looked at like half-day absences for elementary, but if they miss more than 30 minutes, then that would be like that part day absence contributing to one of the 5. And we would say 30 minutes because they might come back too late after lunch or leaving the school building early for the day, right? So all of that mattered to our tracking system. And then at the secondary level, it was like, I would say maybe a little too strict. I might change things up now, but at the time it was like, well, you're tardy until 10 minutes and then you're absent from class, right? And so you're unexcused absent. So that's one instance of a tardy or one instance of a truancy correlating towards the 5-part or whole day. Now, the bigger districts in Wisconsin, MPS, MMSD, I think Green Bay as well, but some of the bigger districts, unless somebody's here from one of those districts who wants to tell me, but I believe that they actually calculate the truancy, the part day, on the way that they report to the state for chronic absenteeism. So they do that 1/3 of a day to 2/3 of a day kind of calculation. which is not required by statute. As you probably know, right? Like reporting to DPI is a completely different thing than the habitual truancy stuff, right? But I have learned that the bigger districts do just use that measure, and then they set up their systems. I mean, I think it is really difficult to set up your elementary reporting system because, like, for reporting, you have to do whatever DPI is saying, but then like that doesn't translate to calculating truancy. So this is all very confusing. Yeah, and then I've been asked recently, like, what's the best practice? Like, I can't find any research on best practice, especially because it's so different state to state. So there's not like every state. It would have to be somebody in Wisconsin, like researching what makes the most sense. But then really what the research says is don't worry so much about truancy. It's not about habitual truancy as a data point. The research is tied to chronic absenteeism. So how are we just looking at absences overall, excused or unexcused for students? And then what do our interventions look like there, right? Certainly having that really strong universal piece. And then, yeah, like checking in with any family. Like I used to call families that had like chronic medical conditions and be all up on them for notes and like your kid's missing all this school, and I kind of came at this punitive like you have to follow state statute. And now I would be like, whoa, let's consider maybe a health plan is needed, or like let's look at the improvement we want to see in your attendance in light of where you're at now, right? I'm not going to expect you to go from 10% attendance to 100% attendance in 2 weeks. And like, can we get connection with a bigger team here with a medical provider, mental health provider, right? Like, what does that actual plan look like? And like, how can we support your student? And that these absences, like, let's not get into this conversation about is it excused or unexcused. Let's have this conversation about like, why is the student missing school and how can the school support that? And what does your family need? And all of those, I would like be shifting my conversation now. So that's just a few things that are coming to mind. And I'm sorry, I want to grab this chat as well. I'm seeing some additional things around, right? So elementary is any missed time is considered a half day. Secondary is any missed class period is measured as a half day for unexcused, wanting to shift that, counting individual hour absence instead of a half day. Yeah, I don't even know what to recommend. And then I want to go back earlier to Morgan. You said that new staff this year are under a grant. That's yay, grant. Working with prevention and truancy, AODA, student truancy at risk, homeless foster care. Great, because yeah, we know that absenteeism disproportionately impacts our students of color and our students in poverty, right? And that like poverty in general as an indicator really can show you which students are more likely to be absent and vice versa. There's like a very big correlation because of neighborhood issues, transportation issues, family challenges, all these social determinants of health and how they impact a student's ability to get to school. So you developed a tracking sheet. Is that tracking sheet like on Excel or something, or is it Google, like a Google sheet or something? Yeah. Yeah, and at the end of the first semester, 109 students have hit 5. So creating interventions and tiered responses. I love tiered responses. That's great. The conferences and students and families. One thing that we're about to do is I'm starting this idea. I'm trying to gather from around the state, like Emmy, your great ideas about like, what are the things you're doing that are working? And I want to highlight those for others. So the one that I'm starting with is happening in Appleton. They actually worked with their county, Outagamie, and they created this education lesson on attendance for students who were like starting to have absences. And they have seen for the students that they do this program with, I think it's only 1 or 2 period like lessons. They've seen 75% of those students have improved their attendance. So they like go through with those, it's a middle school intervention. They go through with them like the importance of absences and just like talking about that. I am still getting my hands on the lessons. So it's like, yeah, I love that idea of like, what are the things we can do where we hit a bunch of students at the same time? Like I know in MPS, they have like thousands of students, right? So they actually do the 5-day attendance meetings with a group of students, which is like wild to me how to think about. But, any of those things, like how can we get more partners with us, like the county folks or whoever? And then what are things we can do more at the universal and second level so that our high flyers, we don't have to have as many of those high flyers. So thanks, Morgan. It's updating per intervention level, letter, conferences, meeting with SRO before even going to citation. Great. Yeah, get to that root cause, right? Because punitive approaches to truancy have been shown in the research to cause more school absences. So if we keep in mind our goal of truancy prevention, we want to increase graduation rates and deter skipping. And if we are making families like feel isolated from us or we're angry at them, then we're not going to, and the fines and fees and stuff really don't work with a lot of students. It just depends on the system. So looking to create a family night to educate on absences, how it impacts learning. This is the first year truancy is being more enforced and watched. Yeah, absolutely great. Missy, did you want to share more about what's going on in your area?
Sure. Yeah, I'm in Altoona, and we too had some work to do first with just coming together across our buildings and being consistent, both in kind of our practices and our process, and then how do we communicate with families? Because as you mentioned, you might have different siblings across different buildings, and we wanted that to look the same. Some strategies that we've used, and I'm certain are things that others do also with the attendance improvement meetings. We've got the nudge letters that really kind of focus on like the impact of schooling that's missed versus kind of the punitive, like this will become a, citation or whatever, but here's how that impacts learning and achievement over time. We also do the empathy interviews, again, set up with typically somebody who's got the closest rapport with the family member or student. And then our social worker at our secondary level does also home visits once a student meets a certain threshold for absenteeism, just so we're kind of digging into the why. Through this, actually, the grant, we've established what we are calling a system of care programming, which includes a collaborative partnership with the Eau Claire County social worker that we contract and we have on site for our district. And that looks different. She's 4K through 12. So at the early intervention level, she's really doing like caregiver coaching and meeting with families potentially at the home, maybe at school, wherever they're most comfortable, in trying to problem solve like what's getting in the way of the student coming to school. And then at that upper level, she's doing more individual services with students directly and setting goals for attendance and what do those incremental kind of increases look like. I think are stuck in an area that we continue to grapple with finding and problem solving as students with big mental health needs, and how do we provide that support when resources are so slim.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Missy. Again, I'm just hearing so many great things about that, focusing on the learning missed, right? Instead of that punitive, like these are the fines that could happen. I found it also helpful working with parents and asking them, like, what are your goals for your student? What are you hoping to see here? That helped me learn one time I was working with an elementary mom who said, I don't think that school matters at all. And so I was able to address that, trying to, like, oh, you don't have those academic goals for your child. So great, let's talk about that. And then the empathy interviews, are you by any chance using like the template that DPI has available for those? You are. Okay, wonderful. I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that wonderful resource. I've also been starting to look at our school mental health resources, framework resources, and how they can apply to attendance. So I'm going to throw the roadmap for school mental health in here. And then on this, so I think this whole roadmap could be great if your school is just starting to develop an attendance team and you're going to like think about, okay, well, how do we get this commitment? What's our assessment going to look like? Like how Emmy was like, what do we have in place already? What are our strengths and needs? Then the planning piece of it, then, you do the implementation and then reflection. So this school roadmap can be used for mental health kinds of system stuff, but like school attendance and mental health and wellness and all goes hand in hand. And then on this same page, if you scroll down, you'll see the empathy interview tool that Missy was talking about, which I think is great, right? Like really gets to those root causes. And I think do you use it, Missy, with individual students or with groups of students to get
Usually individual.
Individual, yeah. Okay. Yeah, to like find out what's going on with individual is awesome. Get to that root cause. I've also heard of it used with groups when you're just sort of doing like a system-wide assessment, kind of like a focus group or something, like for this subpopulation, what's going on? Why are they having more absences than others? Or, what are their strengths and needs? These other tools, the fishbone tool, the driver diagram, the planning tool, I think all of these can be used in the context of attendance as well. So we're actually looking at putting out some more like sort of examples around what that could look like. So I love that. And then It's great you have that system of care worked out. Like, I've heard of different districts are starting to look towards that. Do you pay for, like, is it a shared cost of the salary of that person? No.
No, our program is completely funded by our district.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Yeah. In some, maybe one or two areas, they split the cost with the county. So it just kind of depends. I did see recently that there were grants from the Department of Justice open related to working with counties on truancy stuff. So I'm not sure if those closed already, but anyway, it's always good to be looking for those. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then I just wanted to note that Becky had put in the chat, they're doing attendance improvement meetings as well, partnering with PSG for the youth outreach program to help with attendance. Do I know what PSG is? Did I miss that? Is this the grant?
Support group.
Parent support group for the youth outreach program to help with attendance. Oregon Local High School to promote consistency. Oh, professional services group. Great. Okay.
Even better.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so just like that kind of focus on promoting consistency. Yeah. Oh, and I also wanted to mention about when Missy was talking about that, some systems of care person really doing that like one-on-one support with high school students, that really high need. That is shown as that's like one of the evidence-based measure interventions. The only one on the like What Works Clearinghouse website is the Check and Connect program out of Minnesota. That does cost money, but like if you think about what are the essential elements of that, it's mentoring. It's like this like one-on-one connection with the person to check in, set the goals, think about removing barriers. Sometimes it's also just for that person to help meet a basic need, right? Or like refer them for a service like that, which a school social worker can do, but it just depends on how many you have and their caseload and everything as well. But mentoring in general is often comes up if you're looking at all these like, what's the research or evidence base? It's like some kind of mentor check-in kind of thing. One of my attendance interventions for a middle school student was finding a mentor in the community who came in twice a week and taught a student guitar lessons because they just were interested in learning guitar. And so it's like, it doesn't always have to be about academics or school. It's just like, what's the hook for them? What do they care about? What's something that would make them feel like we care about them and that they want to come to school? And with that student, it took me like a semester of them barely attending any classes, right? So, people were getting nervous, like, Julia, are you doing anything here? And who knows, maybe, the kid could have like just dropped out at any point because you never know what's going to work or not. But, I felt like all of the positive connection we had. And so, yeah, maybe that student didn't learn a ton that we wanted him to learn for a semester, but he kept coming to school. And so by second semester, he had like over 90% attendance and attending like generally all of his classes. And I just don't think we would have gotten there if we had, just been like negative, punitive, isolating. Let's see, I see more stuff in the chat. And yeah, Morgan, Pokemon cards. Yeah, right. Any of the positive, like, yay, you're here, right? Or elementary, I love like giving the jobs, right? Like I had students come in to organize books in the library because the library needed that support. So they had to come right before school so they could help organize the books or put the books back. Or the principal who would create like fake notes, but real notes. It actually served two purposes. The principal would create these like positive gratitude notes, and then we'd have the student, oh, you have to be here right on time to pass out the principal's notes, and they would walk around and give out positive notes of appreciation from the principal to teachers. And so that kids' attendance went up and teachers, feelings of happiness went up probably too. So lots of good stuff there. Tatiana, I see you're just joining us. I don't know if you're ready to talk, but we'd love to provide a space for you to share just kind of where you're at, your role, district, and then what's going on for attendance, challenges, struggles. We're hearing a lot of good, positive things happening.
Yeah, I don't know what Heidi shared before I got here, but so as far as the grant goes, they use that to hire me as the first school social worker in West Salem in like 18 years. So I just started this year here. So we've just kind of been working out that. I'm district wide, which presents its own challenges. I came from being in one building with about a little bit less, but about a similar population of kids, but having 3 buildings to bounce between and not being there for the kids every day is a little bit of a struggle. As far as attendance goes, I think, and I think the West Salem would agree that I'm doing a lot of, they didn't have a strong attendance policy that they followed. They had the policy, but they weren't really necessarily following it, or programs or implementations. So we're working on that, trying to get like regular meetings. I think the big thing that I've been trying to push is documentation of what we're doing, and follow through with, like, if you're going to say we're going to do something, then we actually need to do it. And then I think one thing I'm working on is working with the staff on just kind of what you were talking about, Julie, is that with some kids, if a kid hasn't been to school in 2 months, when we get them to school, it's not, all right, we'll be in class all day and have a good time, see you later, and then expect them to come back the next day or even stay the whole day. So patience with kids and families and meeting them where they're at and celebrating them. I think West Salem's still at this place where, like, when a kid shows up after 2 months, they're like, where have you been? You know, versus like, oh my God, I'm so glad to see you, you know, that kind of stuff. So we're working through a lot of that. And then patience. And like when I start working with a family, that doesn't mean that you referred them to me and then tomorrow they're going to be at school completing their work. That I have to build a relationship and build trust, and then also build that trust. They might trust me, but then I have to get them to trust the school and the school district and the teachers. So that's kind of where we're at, working out some kinks, and but it's been going well.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I
Yeah,
think
just
Julie, if I say for a second, I think that's such a great point too, Tatiana, about the trust piece, because I think, so I think back when I was a teacher, as a principal a little bit, sometimes you get caught in the academic side, right? Just the goals that you have to get achieved, right? And you don't think about that trust side, and that a lot of times the families that are struggling with attendance, somewhere along the way, some trust has been broken, potentially, right? And so it might not be us, it might have been somewhere else, but somewhere in their lives, something happened with school where maybe that trust was broken. And so it's important to start there with that relational piece. So that's a great point.
Mhm.
I think in a school, especially like West Salem, where 90% of the kids and families do exactly what they're supposed to do all the time, the teachers struggle with the 10% or less that don't. So they're not prepared to have those kind and generous conversations with parents because they don't know how to have them. And so they come off as rude or demanding, and that turns a parent off, and they're like, well, I'm not invested, I'm not engaged, I don't care. And same for kids. So it's just like teaching them how to engage with this type of parents, because it's not something they have to do very often.
Yeah, such a good point. Thanks for sharing that. I actually, 2 years ago, had my own fourth grader have some school refusal. I think it was a little bit late and like left over from the pandemic. Third grade, like he was out for a year and a half almost of school and did virtual. And then he was fine in third grade, but in fourth grade, he just started having like a very difficult time. The whole fourth grade was really difficult. And so, you know, he would refuse to go to school in the morning, have just huge meltdowns. And, you know, like me and my partner were doing everything we could to support him and his mental health and his wellness and also school attendance. And like, you know, I present on attendance, like I know all of the laws and all of the statutes and I know all of the like best practices and all of this. Not all of them, but you know, I work on best practices. And I just remember thinking like, if this principal or anyone at the school comes up to me and has any kind of attitude, right, any kind of negative about like, oh, late again today, or, you know, I can't believe your son's, you know, you're like trying to kind of drag him out of the car, you know, or like you're like, you know, I didn't like physically drag him out of the car, but I would like set him outside and shut the door, you know, like you need to go to school. Anyway, I was trying everything. But I was like, it was so hard emotionally for me as a parent, right? And I just was like, I swear in my mind, I was like, I know these are great people, but in my mind, if anybody says to me anything other than great job, mom, you got him here today, or you got to the parking lot, you got to the front door, I was just like ready to be pretty upset. And luckily the school district had Care Solace, so they helped me get connected to a therapist. And, and that was interesting as well because, here also I promote mental health. I help write the mental health framework. And and we often want to get kids connected to mental health support and therapy, and that is great. And in my experience, I felt like for him, it was like emotional regulation. It's not like he had a mental illness exactly. It's like a mental health challenge and he needed support with. But I found that the most impactful part of this whole therapy was the half an hour it took me to drive him to the appointment, and we would just be talking together in the car. So that's a side point, but just thinking about like, everything in schools that we promote and talk about, and then like how does then it actually like happen, like land for a parent and a kid, and what do they need and what's their experience, and therapy can be great and wonderful, but then also is like, what other supports do we have for emotional regulation? What can we do as a school social worker or people service person in the school related to emotional regulation, and then maybe in support with the therapist if the parent wants to sign that release, and all of that, of course, towards then better attendance promotion. And positive end of my story, let me just tell you that he goes to school regularly and just fine now. Okay, go on.
Well, and Julie, I always try to tell staff, like your story, you're a highly skilled, professional, educated woman, and you were dysregulated by that to the point where that could have gone really bad if a staff had a certain tone of voice or a certain look on their face. And then we turn around and expect our families and kids without those skills, without even that, to be appropriate when we aren't always being appropriate ourselves. Sometimes I hear like our AAs when they're talking to families about it, like, oh, why aren't they coming today? And I'm just like, you guys, can we not say it like that? Can we leave those conversations to me, and you just get the information and try to leave your judgment out of it? So that would be one thing. And maybe this does exist, I just haven't had time to look, is like a training for the general staff about what those type of engagements, especially surrounding attendance, can do to a family, like how it negatively impacts them, those little things, the little things we say, the tones of our voices, how we greet them, the looks on our faces, our body language, specifically like when it comes to attendance issues with families and kids, would be, I think, something that would be super wonderful.
That's an awesome idea. I often thought when I was in the district that we needed just general customer service training, especially for our front office staff. Like there was one that was well known to be super scary. Like even staff didn't want to talk, like ask her questions. I was like, this is the person that greets our families, right? I was like, where's our like customer service, basic customer service training? Well, I love that. Well, let's go with that, Tatiana. Anyone else have ideas about what could be helpful resource from a state or CISA level? What else do you need to work on this attendance improvement issue? Probably money to hire 6 more school social workers, I know. All right, well, you can think about it. Well, what other kind of things are you doing that you want to share you haven't had a chance to talk about, or questions do you have for each other or me about anything related to attendance and truancy? Or again, it's hard to enforce when there isn't a lot of meat in the stew. Yeah, so like if you don't have there's not necessarily a lot of punishments, and we even recommend against like that punitive stuff, right? And some counties, I don't know, I can't remember, some counties aren't taking, or they're diverting all like truancy referrals. So, right, so we're not necessarily getting support that we might think could be helpful for at least some students from the county, youth justice or otherwise. Some municipal courts, man, they vary widely. I just met with municipal court judges all the way from like one that is using SBIRT, screening, brief, safe intervention referral treatment and motivational interviewing, and or doing the gains with students. Like that's like something that like the judge is talking about with students, you know, and trying to like divert away from fines and tickets and only do that if like, you know, no, they're not responding, not paying any attention whatsoever, all the way to there's a municipal court judge who puts kids in detention for truancy right now. And like that would not be an evidence-based or research-based intervention. So it's like you can have your kid removed and put in a facility, or you can have them do motivational interviewing. And it's just mind-boggling that that would exist in our state, that huge variance. Again, why it's so important to get these like meetings and collaborations going with the systems around us so that we can try to get on the same page about what we believe is the best interventions. And so you guys started SBIRT in New Richmond. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And yeah. Are you doing it with attendance stuff, or is not necessarily, maybe a little bit? Okay. Yeah, with attendance, I think it can be, they're the right students, it can be good, but I always think about what Ross Green talks about with his like lagging skills and collaborative problem solving, where he's like, gosh, if you think that the reason a student's not doing something is because of motivation, then you better be right? Or like really it could be a lagging skill or some other barrier to them not meeting the expectation that we want. And so I think about that as well, like with doing something like motivational interviewing for attendance. It's like, well, is it motivation that's necessarily right? So I think it can be, and I do think that SBIRT and MI can be helpful in those situations, motivational interviewing. But you know, I think we really have to think about like what are those root causes? Like you know, some of you are talking about getting to that root cause, and then if it's that motivation or AODA or something, then that makes a lot of sense. It's, you know, motivational interviewing SBIRT super research based around AODA and vaping. So that's great. All right, as you're thinking of other things, I just want to bring you back to our website just to make sure that you're aware of all the different things that we have there. It sounds like you all are doing a ton of stuff for attendance, so so you probably are aware, but let me just kind of show you this. So you're seeing my screen? Yes, right, we're good on that? Yeah. Okay, so, you know, when you come to DPI, putting stuff in the search bar, just your like general term is always the best. Like 6 different teams that touch attendance in some way. So we have like 6 different web pages that deal with attendance. So I find if you come to the school attendance, if you put school attendance in the search bar, that's helpful to get to these like best practice kinds of resources. And then I do also, when you scroll down, have links to our other pages. If what you're really looking for is our WISE data page, or the shortened day bulletin, or homebound instruction, absenteeism early warning dashboard, all of those DPI resources are here too. But at the top is just this. In the spring, did any of you attend the spring webinar series that we did? We had 4 sessions. Emmy was there. Okay, if you didn't have a chance to, this is a great place. It sounds like you all have this basic stuff around statutes and best practice, but if you have new staff, you know, or you have you're just starting a new collaboration with your county or somebody, it can be helpful to have members watch this recording and then like come back and talk about it, because this just goes, like it really says, it goes through the statutes. So make sure that your district's in line with that. And then the best practice approaches. And then these are like the basic resources that I, you know, recommend related to system improvement. And then when you go down, this is that requirement for having the truancy committee. And that, you know, is that requirement for statute that the school district that's the county seat hosts a specific amount of representatives from around the county every 4 years. And they're supposed to create a plan that specifically addresses certain points related to truancy in the county. And they're supposed to disseminate that plan to all school district boards in the county. And then at least every 2 years, every school district board is supposed to review that plan, decide if they're going to adopt it or tweak it and put it into their policies. So 3 years ago, when I started talking about this, it seemed like almost no districts and counties had these plans and committees going. I'm really emboldened to hear that now when I do presentations, folks are like, oh, I heard you talk 2 years ago and now we've got a committee going. So I'm like, yay, it's working. But if you don't have one going, this can be a statute to use to encourage your district to get folks together. And then, like I said, under the public instruction additional resources, there's handouts from each of those spring webinars, just if you want to like just focus on family engagement or data or the collaboration. Many of you, it sounds like you've already seen this one, but we do have this one, mental health challenges contribute to truancy. So this is to help you thinking like, okay, the mental health challenge contributes to truancy. Is it a time when we need to think about a 504 plan evaluation or IEP evaluation? How would we address attendance with our student who has an IEP? What if the student doesn't come to school at all and they have an IEP? Can we write goals that are not specifically academic focused? And all of that you can find in that document. And then if you need more detailed help with writing goals and things like that, Eva Shaw on the special education team is a really great consultant to connect with. And then Tim Pierenboom, our school psychology consultant, is another great person for that. We also have this non-attending minor students. So let's say you have a student that just disappears, or they say they're going to move, but they never enroll in a new district. You know, those questions, and then students that go to Mexico for a month or two in the middle of the year, like what do you do about all that? This gives some ideas for district policies. Okay, your computer's dying. No, don't leave us. No, just kidding. We understand. And then there's like this basic frequently asked questions, and then 5-year-old attendance as well. That's one thing that we didn't talk about. I think there's a question about it. Like, what do we do about 3K and 4K attendance when there's chronic absenteeism? So my advice there is that we really just focus on school belonging and connection, right? Because the parent could very well take their kid out of school. I just really worry about going after them with like the school rules or the punitive approach at that point. I think it's more about like, yay, you're here, and we'll take 90 days over 0 days. Any days that they're there is going to be helpful for their academic and social growth. And so, you know, it's about routine. So I guess I would start, especially at the beginning of the year, but then throughout, like, let's look at your routines. It's so important to have good morning routines and evening routines for bedtime. And like, think about how this is going to impact them in kindergarten and beyond. You know, yes, the school next year, they're gonna be talking about some, you know, more specific things related to truancy. And so then, you know, you want to have these good routines established now, and just like the precedent that we go to school every day, and this is how we wake up in the morning and get ready for school. I would just do a ton of partnering with families, making the family feel like if they have a challenge, there's somebody in the school building they can come to talk with that about. If it's a basic need, if it's just like parenting, I'm so overwhelmed, you know, whatever it is, that they're like, oh, I can call this principal, this teacher, and talk to them about it, and they're going to support me, so that the school is just this like, yay, wonderful place that my kid loves to go to. I'm, as a parent, feel comfortable, because that's what's going to translate into good attendance later on, right? I do see like 4-year-olds up for truancy in the youth justice system. They get referrals, and I don't know even how that would work, because compulsory attendance doesn't start till they're 6. But certainly youth justice is going to, you know, divert that right out of there, and they're going to be asking the school to do more around school belonging. So that's my thoughts about young attendance. We do have a sample of truancy letters. So Attendance Works did this research that found that just the way the attendance letter is worded and how it looks can cause more parents to actually attend the meetings. So you want to have fewer words on it, and the most important information highlighted and bolded. So we do have an example of what that might look like here. Our special education team did update their shortened day bulletin. If you haven't seen the update, it's got some more detailed language in it. So it's not 100% related to attendance, just knowing that if you're sending a student home because the administrator is just tired of their behavior 7th period, which totally happens. I mean, I was there and I was like, yes, send this kid home, please. But you know, it's not a good practice, but that would be, you know, an out-of-school suspension, right? A de facto out-of-school suspension. They couldn't just excuse that every time, and it could lead to a change in placement, and in fact, you know, a de facto change in placement or a manifestation kind of requirement. So all of that is in here. There's information on homebound instruction. And then, you know, other questions relating to homeschooling, exit types, and reporting, and how your system is for, like, is it a excused absence, not excused absence? All of that is very specific to the district policy. There's these other national organizations, you know, links to them if you're looking for that, and then some best practices. If you haven't read the 2 first ones under this best practices, those are the 2 that I highly recommend. It's the attendance playbook from Future Ed, and then this reducing student absenteeism, just thinking about like all the researched interventions. And then there's some additional ones, again, just looking at what does the literature tell us is best practice. And then you can find each of the recordings and slide decks from the spring webinar series down here as well. Anything else that you're looking for, or you're wondering if DPI has, or? Great. Well, that is what I've got on attendance, Eric.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for the great discussion too. Appreciate it. So I will be in the next week or two, once we get the closed captioning and stuff applied, I'll be sending out, like, recording the webinar, and with that I'll send out the slides, and I'll link in the website there too that Julie shared, so that's easily accessible to everybody. And then do share with colleagues in your district or outside of your district that you work with around school safety or attendance policies, and that would be great. So, I mean, we've already kind of dipped our toes in this, but if there's any other discussion around anything else, it doesn't have to be related to our topics today, just general grant questions, general questions around other programs, anything else that you need help with, we have a few minutes. Feel free to use the chat or to go off mute.
One of the questions that I just have is about budget revisions. We wrote our initial grant, and then due to loss of a complete staff position, there's one smallish component of the grant that we're not going to be able to do. So we'd obviously like to reallocate those dollars if possible. Is it an option for us? Again, we just know we're not going to be able to do what we had set out to do without that particular staff member, that position rather. Is it an option to completely propose a different way to use funds?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great example of it. Give me 1 second here. Let me grab the link. And this is in the slideshow as well.
Okay.
There's a change form that I created. This should take you to it right here. And so in that, yeah, it's just outlining those changes. It's one of those where we want to, we don't want, since it was a competitive grant, we don't want districts making just wholesale changes because, your scoring and funding was based on that competitive application. But also, we know, like vendor availability changes, or like that staffing changes, data changes, right? What you wrote the grant for, you're seeing great progress, or maybe you're seeing more deficits than you anticipated in certain areas. So data changes, you're gonna make a data informed decision. And so absolutely use that change form, and just in there you can outline if it's affecting your SMART goals, that you can change your SMART goals in there. If it's just budgetary or program based, there's spots for that. You don't have to go into, long form paragraph. It can be short explanations, just to do that. And feel free to always reach out, give me a call, or book a meeting with me, and we can chat through it too.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts? You've all been great today in sharing. So that was always great. It always makes it a better conversation when people are willing to share about things that are happening in their district. And so just a reminder, we have one more of these on April 15th. It's a Tuesday, again, 9 to 11 a.m. And we have Kristen Jones, who's our mental health consultant, one of our mental health consultants here at DPI, coming, and she's going to be talking about social emotional learning and all the different resources that are there. And then also, and this is a communication I'll get out to districts here in the coming weeks, we'll be looking at opening up the reporting window for it, probably in late April, May, somewhere in there. We'll get that sent out. It's the exact same as it was last year, no changes to it. So people that completed the reporting last year, it'll look the exact same. But we'll set aside a little time in that April session to just we can talk through it, walk through it again, and just remind people of what that looks like. I'm going to put in the chat, and thank you, Julie. Julie just popped in a slide deck here about chronic absenteeism as well. I'll put in the chat here just an exit ticket. So if you could take a few minutes and go through that. Also, I do monthly office hours as a reminder too. So I changed it last year. I went Tuesdays at 9. This year I changed to see if that better meets people's needs. Wednesdays at 10 o'clock. There's no agenda. There's no presentation. I'm just here. Pop in, ask questions. Saves you an email. Saves you a phone call. We can screen share if there's things specific that you're looking for. And so typically it's around the first Wednesday of the month, depending, sometimes holidays or like start of school, I might adjust it a little bit. But those dates are there, and I'll try to send out a reminder email to the people on our list as well a couple days before. So I put the exit ticket in the chat. It's also linked into the feedback in the slideshow. strongerconnections@dpi.wi.gov is the email for the inbox. Otherwise, you can reach out to me personally. That's all I have. So I appreciate everybody for coming.